materials are you using to make this?
Most of what I'm using is chert. A lot of people call it Flint. You know, sometimes the different geologists, most geologists call it chert because Flint is formed in chalk beds, and there's no chalk, you know, around this area. So, and chert is formed in limestone. And in this area, the Indians wouldn't even have had chert. So, anything that has conchoidal fracture, the Indians would have used. And one of the things around here they most had was quartz. And quartzite has conchoidal fracture. It's like, you know, where BB hits a glass. Can you see here? The cone was made on this piece of chert. And so what the Indians would do is, the cone I've produced, this cone, it shows how chert fractures. It fractures like glass. I don't know if anyone's ever seen where like a BB struck a window and it breaks out. Where the BB hits is a small hole and the fractures spreads out. And so that's where I've come down with a hammerstone made out of quartz on this material here, and I've struck it straight down to produce this cone. And I got to break all the way around. It breaks out this way and then it spreads out. That's one thing about the stone that the Indians would use. Is they had to have conchoidal fracture. If they had this like obsidian, which is like volcanic glass, that's what they'd have preferred. See how it's shiny and sharp edges. In fact, you can make arrowheads out of the bottom of an old fruit jar if you want to. This one over here, this amber one, it's made out of the bottom of an old Clorox jug. And it has wonderful, it flakes wonderfully. So the Indians, with anything that had conchoidal fracture is what they would use. And this stone I'm working on here is some chert from Tennessee. And one of the things that the Indians would also do sometimes to help the flint fracture easier is that they would heat treat it. Now right over here you can see a sample of some chert from, this is from Tennessee. And the orange and the brown and the tan color of the stone is from iron percolated through it. So this is what it looked like when I found it, a fragment of it. And it's really hard to work. So the Indians would heat treat this stuff by burying it under a campfire with a little bit of soil to insulate it from direct heat. And then one thing is the color change. The iron, the brown, and the tan changes to red and pink. So that might be aesthetically pleasing to the Indians for one thing, but the main thing is that, I don't know if you can see the luster change. It went from a dull to a real shiny, the stone. It got more glass-like. And the shinier it is, usually the better it flakes. So that's what the Indians were looking for, is stone that had the best conchoidal fracture. And the first step they would do is that they would have if they had a piece of flint or chert, whatever you want to call it, is that they'd have a hammerstone made out of quartzite, something usually harder than what they're working. And they would first start reducing it down with using a hard hammer. And you have to remember that if you want to strike a flake to come down this way, you have to either hold the material at an angle and hit it straight down this way, or come down like I do at an angle. So when I strike the edge, the flake's going to go this way. It's about a 40-degree angle. And when you hit the very edge, you're producing just a partial cone. And you can see the bulk percussion, which looks like where BB breaks out. And if you just very hit the edge, right on the very edge, you make real small flakes, a series of flakes. And some of these things have just razor sharp edges, and that's one of the main, it's like a disposable knife. You know, you think the modern people we came up with disposable razors. These are like the very first disposable razors, because they could just knock off a couple of sharp flakes very quickly, use them until they got dull and threw them away. And they made all their tools using the same techniques, like scrapers. You just take a large flat flake and quickly, by just knocking off a series of flakes like this along one edge, produce a nice steep angle tool used for like scraping hides. But here's some of the flakes that I've knocked off, probably with a hard hammerstone, like I said here. I attached this from a large nodule. I heat treated it, then I start roughing it into shape with smaller hammerstones to make an arrowhead. As I hit it on the top, on the edge, the flakes come off the bottom. And you do this to remove all the thick portions. And as you started getting it thin, you would knock off the sharp edges using a hard stone like quartzite. And then you would use like sections of deer antler. And a deer antler will thin it down when you have a very small edge. flakes come off the bottom. And you can get flakes travel all the way across to thin this thing down. And that's what I've been doing to get this one to this stage. Been working on about 45 minutes. It was about this large and about this so thick when I started.